It's yet another episode of everyone's favorite new show on the F4W Wrestling Observer Podcast Network and YouTube channel. We're live, pal. Last week, we had all of our 4 chairs filled out, but this week, it's just the 2 of us. Shout out to Bill Withers. Denise Salcedo is off today's show, giving her a well-deserved day off. What does that mean for Andrew and me? Is the 18 to 49 demographic going to be down this week? Let me introduce my co-host, the cool, calm, and collected, and I'm not just talking about his eyebrows, Andrew Zarian. What is up, my friend?
I was hitting you with spooky fingers right now.
How you
All
doing?
good, man. We are the older demo. I find that fascinating that I'm now in the older demo.
So when I started working in Silicon Valley, I was 24 years old, and I have a friend who I used to work with, and we were the two youngest people in the building. And then we both woke up one day and we're like, how are we now like 2 of the older people in the building? Like,
It's
what's
wild,
going
man.
on here?
I've hit that point now where, I've done like everything I'm doing in my day job, my civilian job, and in this like whole wrestling thing. It's kind of come colliding at the same time in my life. And I did this interview with one of our viewers, this guy Charlie, and he's in college. So I did it for his college radio station.
Yeah.
And listen, in my mind, I'm 21. I'm always I'm in my 20s forever. I'm habitually acting like I'm 21. If you follow me on social media, you kind of could put that together, that I really haven't slowed down. And with kids, I've accelerated even more with like risky business decisions, like getting into pro wrestling heavier. But I'm doing this interview and he's like, yeah, the first time I heard you, I was like 12 when I listened. I'm like, how old are you now? He's like, I'm 22. I'm like, holy moly.
That's awesome.
This poor 12-year-old, like I've affected his life. Now he's getting into radio and I'm like, I'm so sorry. You should have never listened to me.
The way that I kind of do it. So, I had kids when I was really young. So I had to I was already a mature person, but you grow up even more married and, children at 24 years old. So my career kind of, as I got older, the thing that kept me, like you say, kind of younger is I just loved working with younger people, whether it was mentoring them or just working on things with them. Because, if you separate, let's say 10 years, if someone's 10 years younger, the way that they grew up and the way that they learn things, it's a totally different process. So that's, there are things that they understand and don't understand that are different from me. So I always found that to be a really interesting thing to do, is work with young people, understand from their perspective, what they're doing, what some of the things that they can do better than us and that we can do better than them. And it just kind of keeps you well-rounded and in the game. So I very much enjoy the idea of us doing this show with Denise, particularly. Not that, you're not that much older than her. I'm quite a few years older than her, but her energy and the way that she sees things is a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, she's not. I'm 30. I'm going to be 38. So I've kind of hit like a weird midpoint in my life. Which I got to tell you, one bit of advice to everybody that's young before we go into wrestling. My 30s have been so much better than my 20s. So I don't know if it was like that for you, but the older I've gotten, the better life has gotten for me.
So every time I think about being busy, I go back to my senior year of college. I'm working 30 hours a week as a part-time employee for a company. I'm doing my my senior year in college. I'm doing my radio internship in San Francisco, which is about a 70 minute drive from where I was living. And I was working Friday nights and Saturday afternoons. And I still had to finish, my last semester of college, 12 units. And I had a kid coming. And so like all of those things at one time, like whenever I think I'm too busy to do something, I'm like, oh my gosh, it wasn't even half as busy as I was when I was 24 years old. But the other thing is as you get older, another piece of advice, you learn how to be able to take on more things because you get much better about time management. You get much better about prioritizing things. So you can actually take on more things as you get older. Like you said, your 30s have been the best, the better decade. You also are a wiser, smarter, working, and just better person to deal with all of those things as well. So you get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, man.
All right, let's
I agree
talk
with you.
about wrestling there. WWE's draft. You're a presentation guy. What did you think about the presentation of what they did on Friday and then last night?
It's interesting because the draft should be like a big reset point for them, right? It's like the halfway point for WrestleMania because like WrestleMania is a big reset point, and then the draft is another for them. Um, I don't think they do a great job with the presentation. I think the ratings are out now, right? Did they come out yet for last night?
I'll pull it up. I'll pull up the Monday
Yeah,
rating. I haven't seen it yet, but I'll
I-
pull
I'm
it up
sure.
for
I'm
you.
sure it's coming out or it's going to be out. But I was actually surprised at the lack of presentation, considering last year, obviously, the draft was kind of half done because there was no live audience. You still were in the pandemic era of WWE, but the fact that it wasn't done in like a new way said something to me. Where I'm like, I'm curious why. Is it a timing thing? Is it a I don't care thing? I don't know the answer. I'm gonna find out, but I can tell you a few things about this draft, and that's there was a report that somebody posted. I forgot. I would love to give credit. I can. I don't remember who did it, but there was a report saying that NBC executives, the NBC side, and the SmackDown side have been very hands on, have been informed on who's going where. Somebody had reported this. The second that report came out, I didn't even ask somebody. Somebody at NBC told me, "No, we have no idea. It would be nice if we knew, but we have no clue." And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Maybe it's one person out of the loop here with this."
Yeah.
But then I got another message, and somebody sent me, some sort of correspondence, and it was like both guys are like, "Yeah, I'm kind of in the dark here."
Wow.
Like it would be nice if we knew. So I think that it's interesting because obviously this plays a big part for the networks, right? Who are they getting? And obviously, USA Network wants the best guys, and so does SmackDown. So how do you balance
Sure.
that? If you look at the draft, and you're a great person to ask about this. I feel like Raw got the better picks than
I feel like
SmackDown did
Raw
this year.
always gets the better picks. And remember, they used to use the excuse that, well, they have an extra hour, so they need more talent. And so
Oh
for
yeah, yeah,
every
yeah,
two
yeah, yeah.
picks SmackDown would have, Raw would have three picks. And that's how they used to, that's how they used to define it. They didn't do that this year, except for, I think they did it in the Talking Smack part of the draft, which no one even knew was coming. Um, I do feel like Raw got the better of the deal, but I think a lot of it is just because of the fact that on the babyface side for SmackDown, there's not a ton of contenders, right? Like who's going to face Roman Reigns? Well, we do have Drew. Drew was drafted on the first night, but after
Yeah.
that, it's like Jeff Hardy, Happy Corbin. Happy Corbin's not even a
Yeah.
baby face, I don't think. I mean, they're just kind of goofballs. Maybe they are baby faces, but
But you know what else
who?
though?
Go ahead.
I'll tell you this. Like, do you feel? And I wanted to ask you this last week, and I totally forgot. When the draft first started happening, you really were invested on
Oh yeah,
even the mid card moves. Like give an example. If Eddie Guerrero gets drafted to Raw, or John Cena, U.S. champion John Cena gets drafted, right? Or whoever the IC champion was at that time gets drafted. Now it doesn't even matter. Like to me, I had no invested interest in anybody going anywhere because I've learned it doesn't matter. The draft doesn't
yeah,
matter.
100%. The very first year that they did it, I thought that was the best one because you had the GMs picking for their sides. And I don't even know if you remember this. This is probably the only time we'll ever mention this name on this show. But Paul Heyman was drafting for SmackDown, I believe. and he had this like surprise pick. Was it who was it? Was it Flair on one side or Bischoff on one side? I don't remember exactly how it
Are you
worked.
talking about what year? 2003
Maybe
draft?
the first one. I think it was the first one.
I
But anyways, what
think that
happens
was the
is
first one.
Chris Benoit is on the shelf. He had messed up his neck. He wasn't wrestling. And so people had sort of forgot about him. And so Paul Heyman like had this like secret pick to take Chris Benoit, which was like, oh, Heyman's so smart. But it felt like it was a real draft thing, right? It's like, oh, you have strategy and you have people thinking about injuries. Like Bailey's hurt. She wasn't on the draft list, I guess. I don't know if she was not qualified to be drafted, whatever it was, but they didn't talk about any of that stuff. There are people who were not drafted. The NXT people, they didn't tell us who was available from NXT. Was it anybody and everybody? Because if it was, and you didn't tell us how NXT people could be drafted, then who's the dumb one who didn't pick Braun Breaker,
Exactly.
right? He's like the best guy on the thing. So
well, forget about that, right? Forget about that part. If you're great example, Roman Reigns was a first pick, right? And he should have been, right? Yes. So you got Roman Reigns. You got to be an idiot if you're SmackDown and that's not your first pick. But now you're talking about like all the other picks. You wouldn't want Tommaso Ciampa if he's in the pool. You wouldn't want, Gargano if he's in the pool. Kyle O'Reilly if he's in the pool. I think it's interesting how they do the draft. The smart thing would be they do a lottery. This is how I would fix it. Bring back that tunny turn, the lottery turner, whatever the hell this is. The ball, what do you call this?
That they used to have for the Royal Rumble.
Yeah. Bring that. And if you draw, a yes or a no, you're eligible for the draft now. You could do that the week prior, and everybody's like, oh, crap. Who's eligible, who's not? You don't want to be eligible. You want to stay where you are, and some maybe want to be eligible to go to another brand. So it adds another level, I think. And then now we know who's in the pool. So if Tommaso Ciampa is not in the pool, it's not draft pick, or let's say Roman Reigns, nobody picks Roman Reigns, you now know he's not in the pool. He's staying where he is.
So how Real Sports would do this, and I mentioned this briefly on our last show, but how Real Sports would do this. So when leagues expand, so let's say there's a new expansion franchise in the NFL, and they need players, right? So let's say there's two. You have two new franchises in the NFL, and they need players. Well, you just don't make everybody available. Like it's not like this new team in the NFL can just go, oh, I want Tom Brady. No, they're not going to let you have Tom Brady. You have to go with the available pool. But WWE says, look, everyone's available. So let's say everyone's available. And you can pick. SmackDown says, okay, everyone's available. If you want to take Roman Reigns Raw, then we get to pull back a guy. So you take Roman Reigns from us, we're pulling back Becky Lynch. You cannot have both of them. And then when SmackDown picks, they go, oh, we're going to grab Big E. And Raw goes, okay, you grab Big E. We're pulling back Lashley. You can't have both of those guys.
Yeah.
There's a strategy in doing it that way. And it also, at the same time, it basically creates the hierarchy, right? You could create a brand new star on that day because you could say, okay, you just took Big E. Well, guess what? We're pulling back Damian Priest.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have him because we see so many big things in him. They don't want to do it in a real sports way, probably because you actually have to book it out a little bit, But I think this makes
change too often.
Plans change. And then this is the way that they want to do it. Like they even went against what they said they were going to do with like the tag team champions on the women's side. Like that's only one. And then they still drafted them when they said they weren't going to draft them. So, this stuff, it's a lot of moving parts. So I don't completely blame them for how sloppy some of this stuff is. But if you did want to put a little bit of thought into it, which remember 2 years ago when they first did this with the Fox thing, and they had the little war rooms and they had like the NFL robot and they had actual, pseudo Fox celebrities announcing picks. Like that was a step in the right direction, but if you actually made it like a real draft. So there's one other thing I want to mention and we can move on and just talk about some of these picks. So Gable Steveson gets drafted, right? He's at home with his parents. Yay, Gable gets drafted to Raw. Like, that was an attempt at doing something kind of interesting, but I wouldn't have done it with Gable. I would have done it with the NXT guys. Like, you have like this pool of NXT guys. Let's say anybody who has been on the NXT roster for 2 years is available to be drafted. So you got the little camera in Gargano's house. You got the little camera in Ciampa's house, Kyle O'Reilly's house, and you see their real reactions for getting picked or not getting picked, because neither of the three of them got picked. So they're kind of sitting in the green room like has happened in the NBA draft before, where you have someone who's like projected to go into the top 15, so they get invited to sit in the green room, and then we're in the second round and they're the only person left, and they're so sad. Like, that creates something for that
the
person.
vibe, yeah.
So, it's just there's so many ways, and they have all of this years and years and years of the NBA draft, the NFL draft, which, by the way, do tremendous ratings for both of those sports, right? The NFL draft, they put it on ABC, they put it on ESPN, they stream it on all of their things, and it does giant numbers. WWE could inflate their number for Raw if they just did it in a more serious way, but that takes a lot of work, and that's just haven't been how they've been doing it.
I asked somebody like 2 years ago, a friend of mine over there, and I was like, "Hey, listen," I go, "The draft is kind of silly sometimes, right? Because like, wouldn't you want the top stars, right?" He goes, "No." He goes, maybe Raw doesn't need a center. Maybe we're looking for a forward. And I go, dude. I go, first of all, what is that the equivalent of? Like, we're not looking for the main eventer. We're looking for a upper mid carder. Like, how does that make any sense? That was his. And he just laughed after that, because I think people realize like you can't treat this like an actual draft, because the reality is, what are you looking for to draft? What position are you looking to draft? There's so many different things you could do creatively. Like, what if you have a heel? I mean, there's no GMs, right? But what if you have a heel GM that hates Charlotte as the world champion? So you draft somebody to take that title from her. A good opponent for her. There's so many different things that they could do, but I agree with you. I think it's kind of they need to rethink this.
You could have had all champions unable to be drafted, but you could have traded Charlotte for Becky if you wanted to. But the problem is they have the brand specific belts, so it's kind of wonky in that if you have a you could trade back the top men's title, because one's the WWE and one's the Universal. They're not brand specific, but the other belts are brand specific. So why are those folks able to be drafted? Shouldn't they have to stay on their side with their brand specific title? Are Charlotte and Becky just going to say, "Oh, here's your belt, and now give me that belt"? Are they going to lose those titles before the switch on October 22nd or whatever that day is? So there's a lot of stuff that I always kind of bring up the New Japan stuff, because Gedo historically like books his G1 stuff and his whole year like way in advance, and it's very meticulous. WWE doesn't do it that way, and it's unfortunate, because if, let's say, Gedo booked the draft, there would be callbacks to things that would have happened a year and a half ago that you would be reminded of, and that would make things so cool. But this is just they do it their way, and this is the way that they've been doing it. We can't compare. We can't, I guess, I don't know, give them a demerit for not doing it the way that we wanted. But I just think it'd be so much more fun and interesting. Was there any matchups that were created based off of these new rosters that you were looking forward to?
I mean, definitely Drew and Roman, right? Because Drew's going to SmackDown. But I think the big question here is that SmackDown is so light on the top baby faces now. Who's after Drew, right? Let's say Drew and Roman, they run a program. Who's on number 2 babyface on SmackDown? That
you got to make one. I think.
Who's on number? You got to make one. So who do you make? Who's a guy that's a believable opponent for possibly one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Roman Reigns, by today's standards?
I guess you could technically turn Sheamus babyface. He's had a good year, but he's had a good year sort of in that, like, U.S. title, intercontinental title status. They put Jeff
Mike
Hardy on TV a
Nakamura?
lot, but Nakamura, but he's already sort of cemented. If we got main event New Japan Nakamura, that would be quite interesting. I just don't think that guy exists anymore.
I don't
Yeah,
think he
it's
wants it
tough.
to exist, to be honest.
I mean, hey, he's living his best life right now, and I do not blame that
Yeah.
guy at all. Ricochet, they're never going to take him seriously. The one thing that kind of caught my eye, if you're an NXT fan, you've seen Ridge Holland, and Ridge Holland has, we'll use real sports NBA lingo. Ridge Holland has tremendous upside. What a
Yeah,
ceiling on that
definitely.
guy. But is he ready to face Roman Reigns? Probably not. I think Roman could get a good
Probably
match
not.
out of him, but he's not ready to be at that level. You got Kingston, but we've seen that before. Yeah, it's really tough. They're gonna have to. I think they're gonna have to either create somebody or maybe trade somebody back that they didn't think about. Because they even pulled. Finn had a one match one match series with Roman, and now he's on Raw. So
Yeah.
it's a little tough. The one that I liked though, and I could just watch these two women wrestle every day of the week, which is Charlotte and Sasha Banks. I do like them being partnered together, not partnered, but being married together for matches.
Yeah.
I think they're both tremendous. And then on the other side, Becky and Bianca are look to be still doing stuff, but I don't know. Bianca has. I don't know what the idea is yet because we have to let this play out. But it does seem like out of those four women, she is number 4 between Becky, Charlotte, Sasha, and Bianca. And I don't know, I would just try to make her, be number 1 because the hotter that Bianca is, we already know Becky, Charlotte, Sasha, they're great. It just raises the level of that division. And just by the way things are going, she's been in the main event on Friday and Monday. And at the end of both of those shows have been other women who have been highlighted. So that scares me a little bit about Bianca and how they see her in this role as maybe going to that next level.
I could tell you that they're very high on Bianca. Very, very high. And I I think for her, they want to be very careful on how they push her and when they push her because she will be, I mean, a major face in that company in the future. I mean, moving forward, right? You could already see it. She is everything that they've ever wanted. I'm not that worried about her, but some interesting stuff. Becky's on Raw, right? Um, I, I'm very curious what happens with Ronda Rousey now.
Mm.
Now, she just had her baby.
Yeah.
A year from now, 9 months from now, couple months from now, it's a very interesting dynamic if you inject her because I know they really want that Becky and Ronda match that never happened. They really, really want that. Now I'm looking at this. Hell, I want to see Ronda and Bianca Belair.
Yep.
That's like that's a major, major match for me that I want to see. I think Ronda, I expect her to come back in some capacity for a program. So the Raw side may be good because I would expect her to go to the Raw side to kind of balance things out over there with the women's division. So we'll see.
So
I mean, I'm very interested.
yeah, no. Anytime you can bring Ronda back, it's tremendous. Let's talk about the NXT stuff because that was
Yeah.
kind of what I was looking at the closest when it came to this draft because like you said in the beginning, people just switching back and forth. It doesn't really mean a whole lot, but bringing somebody up in a draft who was not on the brand, it's new, it's fresh, it could
Yeah.
be interesting, in the right way. Hit Row is brought to the SmackDown roster. So the NXT North American champion. So I imagine he's losing this in one of the next 2 weeks.
I
Swerve
would
Scott,
imagine.
Top Dollar, Ashante the Adonis, and B Fab, who was called Fab B on SmackDown. They are coming up now. I'm a little worried because when NXT became NXT 2.0, Hit Row did not feel as organic as the previous version of NXT. When Hit Row came out, I was like, this is the best act I've seen in years because they let it be organic. It was hip hop and it was so fresh, and it's been watered down. They put B-Fab in the ring and she had a terrible match with Elektra Lopez, and I felt like that pulled the group down. So I'm a little worried with this version of Hit Row because of they're going to SmackDown, which is more like NXT 2.0 than the previous version of NXT. So I'm a little worried about them. We talked about Ridge Holland coming up. Xia Li, who they kind of started and stopped a lot on NXT. They created this very interesting version of her, lots of theatrics, lots of production, lots of backstory. I don't know if all of that is coming. I would imagine it is coming, but she was never put in a position on NXT to have any main events. So she's an interesting one. I just worry that the reason she's drafted is because of all the smoke and mirrors that they love. They can put together these giant productions. But someone like Raquel Gonzalez, who's been the champion, someone like Dakota Kai, someone like Io Shirai, those seem much more like better possibilities to make the jump because in the case of Io Shirai, one of the best wrestlers in the world. Raquel Gonzalez, Raquel is not one of the best wrestlers in the world, but she's very impressive. They've protected her. She's big. She looks like a champion. So I was just, not that I was surprised at who came up. And I'm even looking on the Raw side. I guess Tegan Nox was on SmackDown already, and she's now on the Raw side. I guess Karrion Kross, they're keeping him on Raw. He was formerly of NXT. Keith Lee, I guess you could kind of reinvent him as well. I don't have
Bearcat.
a ton. Yeah, Bearcat Lee. I don't have a ton of confidence in that. But, they had an opportunity to bring some of these folks over, and they just chose some very interesting folks from NXT. Was there, you mentioned Ciampa and Gargano and people like that. What would you have done with the NXT roster?
It's hard to tell because the direction of NXT has shifted tremendously. I mean, it's a total 180 from a year ago to today, right? The hope was NXT builds up and coming talent, NXT builds independent talent that wouldn't kind of have a place on the main roster without going to NXT. The entire concept of NXT shifted. So if this was a year ago, we would all be talking about an Adam Cole coming up and where he's going to be placed and who he's going to feud with, or Tommaso Ciampa coming up and how you're presenting him in an upper mid-card position. Now, NXT is something very different. So you really don't want to take Ciampa and Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly because you need that backbone on the product that has name recognition. But you also need to elevate people. And we've seen them do this in the past where we've questioned, how come so-and-so didn't get drafted or come up to the main roster, but so-and-so did? They've gone back and forth with this. It's a very different NXT. We're back to how, the original concept of developmental, and I don't necessarily blame them for going in that direction. I think it's a survival tactic for them. They have to go to that direction. They have to develop new talent on this other show because if you're that good and you got that big of a name, you're most likely going on main WWE TV to combat everything else that's happening right now in pro wrestling and change the perception a little bit. So, guys like a Nakamura, for example, will most likely, those days of Bobby Roode here. Okay, good example. Samoa Joe. Here we go. Samoa Joe.
Great Big name Bobby, recognition. As he was called yesterday.
Big Bobby. I know. Terrible. That skit was ridiculous. But you got guys that have been veterans, established, name recognition, going to NXT. Those days, why would they ever do that now? They're in a battle. I mean, I know that people pretend it's not, but it's not a battle of money or ratings. It's a battle of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And you want WWE to be the top product. You're not going to take a guy like Samoa Joe and put him on a show that only 500,000 people watch, or Nakamura where only 500,000 people watch. You're going to want to put them on the main roster to combat the perception that your talent is not, your wrestling is not up to par.
Yeah.
or your product is not up to par. So I mean, listen, 2016, different. They had to create competition amongst themselves, and they did with 3 different brands. Now they have actual competition in some perception. I'm not going to talk not business wise, but perception wise.
Sure.
So it's very easy. You take a guy, you send him for 2-3 weeks just to train, finishing school. I should say, because that's what it was for a lot of these guys, and then move them to the main roster, and that's how they debut, like an AJ Styles more than anything else. I think whoever leaves AEW next, I'm talking a big name. I'm not talking, I don't even want to insult anybody, but we know who the big names are. The big
MJF,
name for me.
if they were able to grab MJF.
In another era, I would say he is perfect for NXT, and he could have a great run there. Now, I'm going to say you put him immediately on that main roster and have him cut promos on those other guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Different world.
What have you heard about Steveson? I mean, I can't imagine he's going to be actually wrestling until his wrestling season is over. But they put him on Raw. So they're going to have segments on him. They're going to have him cut promos. Like what do you think is going on with what they have plans with him for?
So it's very interesting. It's almost like they want to accelerate this project quicker than they should. I mean, listen, he's a pure athlete. I would be shocked if he doesn't get it. Never say never, but the amount of discipline that's required to be a collegiate athlete and an Olympic athlete on that level, like the top level. Listen, he was born in 2000. Okay, he's 21 years old. You don't need to rush him. You don't need to. He has plenty of time. This dude is 6'1", 265. You could do so much with this dude. I get that they're trying to push him and maybe do something really quick. Take your time. Just take your time with him. He doesn't need to be drafted to show up on TV. He really doesn't. And I'd rather not have him on TV if he's not prepared.
Yeah, I just imagine, they're not paying him to do nothing, right? They're going to utilize him, whether it's in their social media or whether it's in some of the marketing or whether there's this
ambassadorship.
Yeah, I mean, there could be, now we're talking about long-term booking again, which maybe it's not going to happen this way, but you could bring him out on a show in a month and say, this guy is going to be a big player for us. We're showing him off. He's got the gold medal. He's a wrestling champion. And, you're going to see him. You're going to have to wait for his debut because he's still got to finish up. But you can create this idea of this very long introduction. And then when he really does finally wrestle, people are just like, oh, finally. It's been 8 months and we haven't been able to see this guy. So I would hope that if that's the plan, they could do something like that, because then you build up his debut to be this really big thing. So I think that would be
I have a
cool.
question for you. Do we know, is he, I don't remember if I heard, is he a wrestling fan?
I don't think he was like this giant, like diehard wrestling fan. The only thing I had ever heard is that when he was in high school, Paul Heyman was really high on him. And then, he and Brock became good buddies.
Visionary, that man.
Paul Heyman is a great judge of talent, right? Like, he's a tremendous judge of talent. So I guess I shouldn't even say if he is or not, because I really don't know. But I feel like if he was like this giant wrestling fan who was like diehard, kind of guy, we probably would have heard about that.
You know who else I had heard? Who won gold for the women's wrestling team in 2016? Man, do you remember her?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
My brain just stopped. Greek last name. My brain is totally stopped. I have a terrible headache today, so it's affecting me. But she was on that list for a while.
Helen
really wanted.
You mean Helen Maroulis? Yeah.
Yes. She was on the list for them for a long time. Yeah, it's so funny you said that, because as soon as I put in Helen in Google, she came up.
I think she had like some pretty bad concussion issues. I think, but I want to say that she's healthy again because she competed again and everything. But yes, I like the fact that they're looking at bringing in these athletes, but it's kind of interesting because there's lots of people on the current NXT roster who have wrestling backgrounds and have athletic backgrounds, but you can't have like a Chad Gable and a Gable Steveson and then, the brothers in NXT. Like, you can only have so many of those guys, right? Because it's a variety show. So you have the background, but then you got to create a character that may not be organic to who they really are, which is just great athletes. There's a trick involved into that, I think. And, hopefully they have some ideas for all these really, really good athletes. One more thing, and we'll hang on the WWE side for a second. By the way, it looks like ratings were delayed for about an hour, so we may not get them before this show goes off the air.
I think 4:45 will get them.
Okay. So Crown Jewel, they're building up this Crown Jewel show, and we get to see Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. The roles are flipped here. Brock Lesnar, the babyface, the free agent, against Roman Reigns, who very frustrated with Paul Heyman because of their prior relationship. And Brock said that thanks to Paul, he's a free agent. He wasn't available to be drafted. The Usos, they had to make sure the Usos are drafted the SmackDown brand, as if Heyman has anything to do with this randomness of who gets drafted.
Yeah,
but
I know.
they're really building up this match, which, there aren't too many must-see matches, and we've already seen Roman and Brock, but to me, we haven't seen that really, really great version of Roman and Brock. I think WrestleMania 31 was probably the closest because that was a really brutal match. But that's what we remember about that night is when Seth cashes in and he wins a championship. I don't know if they're going to have that great, great match here, but I want to see it because of the dynamic. I want to see it because Brock, as the babyface, theoretically, is not just going to run through him and put him in all these crazy moves and boom, 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 boom. It seems like this may be a little bit of a longer match where Brock has to do a lot of selling, comeback. The problem with that, though, this is such the wrong crowd for that match because, they're there because, it's more of a spectacle and not because they're real giant wrestling fans. I'm not saying all of them, some of them, most of them probably. But if this is kind of a setup to maybe what they're going to do down the line, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, whenever this match really, really does happen, I think there's a classic in them. And I think they would want to prove that because all of those other matches that they had were in the shadow of this Roman Reigns as a babyface, the crowd not accepting him. There was always that stuff going on that overshadowed their matches. Now that they're both over, and Roman Reigns has technically always been over, but in the way that they're trying to tell the story, I think they could really have a magical match. So I don't know if it's going to happen here at Crown Jewel. I can't wait to see that version of match that I do expect them to have at some point.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to see this. I like this version of Brock. It's very different. We've never gotten this. We've gotten a babyface Brock before, but never like I'm wearing plaid in to show support to Brock Lesnar and his free agency.
There you go.
So I'm interested to see this. He's like a Brooklyn hipster now, which is cool.
Yeah.
He's got the man bun I'm into. And Roman has never listen, I know Roman gets a lot of crap still, right? And whenever I say this, people get so upset with me. I told Dave this. There's no way I'm not voting for him as Wrestler of the Year. This dude is fantastic. The character is close to perfect as you could get, regardless if you like him or love him. It's still a tremendous top act. And when he walks down that ramp, that's somebody important. If you've never tuned on, you just channel stuff, boom, you just stop and you see Roman Reigns walking, you're like, okay, he's somebody. Because of the presentation and how they do it. Brock Lesnar's always been that guy. Brock has always been a top guy for them. So
Brock debuted almost as a top guy.
Yeah,
almost. Yeah.
2002. I mean, listen, you could talk about match of the years, you could talk about performer of the years, but if you're talking a top act, and you're incorporating marketing and money and real real drive. If you add all that, it has to be Roman Reigns. He has yet to have a bad match this year. And the dude is on TV every week.
It's going to be a
It's the
great
first time we've seen.
conversation.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it's very interesting. Are we going to get that match that you're talking about in Saudi Arabia? Probably not. But, if you're doing this now, do you, to me, that means the WrestleMania match is probably not happening, right?
I don't know, because these Saudi Arabia shows, Thursday morning / afternoon, they are creating matches for them, and they're in the storylines, and they're in the canon, and they matter. But more often than not, these shows are disappointing. They're not great wrestling shows. Yeah. They're content, you could say. So even if, they're doing this match now, you let people forget about it a little bit and then you rebuild it back up, I still think it could be something special, because this will be the least viewed version of a match that they've probably had, just because of the fact that, I don't think too many people are going to watch this show compared to a Royal Rumble or a Survivor Series or a WrestleMania.
Yeah, and I don't think they care. They got the money anyway.
All right, let's talk about
they don't have to worry about any of that. Yeah,
yeah, no, 100%, 100%. This is the show to do that match on when you talk about from a profits perspective, the money that you get from this show. So they have Becky, Bianca, and Sasha. I'm actually wondering if they make this a 4-way. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but I asked Dave and he hadn't heard anything about it yet, which is, this is a women's match. Are the women going to be able to wear their gear? Are they going to have to wear oversized T-shirts? Like, what's the deal?
How did they do it the last time? Because they were wearing the shirts. Were they wearing pants also?
I don't remember, but I just remember the oversized shirts.
Listen, it's ridiculous. I mean, I get it, but we gotta look at this in 2021 eyes, right? It's absurd.
Yeah.
I just want to put that out there.
No, it is.
You're gonna have this match. This is a major match that you would have on any pay-per-view. You could have it on WrestleMania, and I don't know. They're doing it over there.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I almost want to see. This is I mean, I understand the reason why they're doing it on this show. I almost would rather see a version of this match on Survivor Series instead, because then they can do the whole shebang, right? You don't have to do a different version of the character, But again, we talked about the reason why they're doing this show. It's a big money making show. I think they see it sort of as, there's growth here. Look at how we're changing the world. But at the end of the day, it's like, no. You're really limiting what your women performers can do and their value by putting them in this thing. So not too happy about that. It looks like RK Bro against AJ Styles and Omos, and then Big E and Drew McIntyre and Goldberg and Bobby Lashley. So you're talking about some really, really big matches. I just wonder if these matches are going to be handled the way that they'd be handled if it was like a big US pay-per-view.
I know that there was a lot of discussion about making this mean more, the Saudi shows, rather than it being just like a spectacle of a house show. They wanted it to mean more. So I'm curious if they do that this time around. Well, we'll find out, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. All right. We got about 15 minutes left here, and I wanted to have a short discussion on AEW's Rampage show. I didn't even tell you about this, so this is coming right off the top of your dome. I was having a conversation the other day about how, as wrestling fans, especially folks like you and I, who we're wrestling fans, but we also, in our passion, have this podcast. We have this show. You have Matt Men. I have the Fight Game podcast. So we're watching these shows. We have to, in order to be able to talk about, all of the things, we kind of have to fit them in. And I was thinking about how Rampage, even though it's 1 hour on a Friday night, it has been so hard for me to watch it on time, at least to where, people are still talking about it, because they had this great match with Bryan Danielson and Nick Jackson, and I was like, "Oh, this match is great." And then I watched that match, and then I just let the rest of the show fall off, and I still haven't watched all the way to the end. How is the schedule of you making sure that you catch everything? I think we've talked about this before, but has your viewing habits changed at all because of Rampage? Or are you still generally able to get things viewed, in a timely aspect?
I just had this discussion with somebody too. One of my buddies, he's like, "Where do you find the time?" Right? Because I got like 3 different businesses, and I got the wrestling thing, and this
Yeah,
is a passion project that's turned into a career of sorts now.
sure.
Which I think I'll have an announcement in a couple of weeks. I think Garrett knows the story, but I think
Here we go.
it's cool. It's pretty big, for me as a pro wrestling follower for all these years. But um, I it is difficult, right? And I have made sure that Raw I watch the way I watch Raw is chaotic. I watch it like 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. That's how I consume Raw. I consumed a 90-minute
Mhm.
version at like 5:30 in the morning while the kids are getting ready for school.
Yeah,
SmackDown has been a very easy watch for me on Saturday mornings. I enjoy it. Dynamite, I either watch it the night of after it's on because I'm never home on Wednesday night at
right,
8 o'clock.
right.
So I have a pattern that I've fallen into. I think the thing that suffered the most is New Japan because I'm
Yeah.
now pushing it further back or Impact or Ring of Honor. But I do want to say, I made a tweet about Ramp. I put it out there about, and this was just my opinion. Um, Perception wise, right? And momentum wise.
Mhm.
Everything that we talk about AEW is generally for the most part positive. I think if you listen to anybody talk that covers professional wrestling in an honest way, you could tell that the excitement level for AEW is a lot higher than it is for WWE currently. I think we could all agree on this. Whether or
Yes.
not one does better business, forget about that the whole ratings thing. Forget about that. But perception wise, shouldn't a Bryan Danielson and Nick Jackson match do more than 600 and what was it? 633,000 viewers for the quarter hour and 300,000 for the demo. If you ask me, I would say that rating, that number at 10 o'clock following SmackDown is a little disappointing.
Mhm.
I get the time frame. I get all of that. I get the day. I get everything. But perception wise, shouldn't that match be doing a whole lot more? As far as eyeballs go, because AEW is a hot commodity right now. It's a hot product. Bryan Danielson is the hottest acquisition that they've done, right? I mean CM Punk too, but he's the hottest because he's going to be in active programs weekly on TV. It's a little disappointing for me that that's the most that they could do. Now, with that said, and this is why it's disappointing. I'm dying. I've been dying to talk to somebody about this that understands it
Mhm.
because it was. I put it out there on social media, and it was difficult to kind of explain it to people. Is that match being on Rampage in front of 600,000 people? Is it hurting Dynamite? Is it taking away from Dynamite? Because now you've taken the hottest guy that you have currently, and you moved him to a show on Fridays on a bad night on a bad time slot. It's not a B show. I wouldn't say that, but I don't know if it helps Rampage by having that match or if it hurts Dynamite by not having that match on there. So I'm gonna put that out there to you because I'm curious. Also, the chat room because we got 167 people here. Um, I'm very curious as to what the long term effects of giving away a match like that on Rampage rather than Dynamite goes.
Yeah. No, look, it's a great conversation to have, and I think when you have more weeks of Rampage and these numbers normalize a little bit, which is it looks like it's what they're doing is they're starting to normalize, then you can really study the effect of the show. And you just said right now, you said you don't think it's a B show. It's an A minus show or a B plus show, I think, because what the way that I look at Rampage is these matches are what would happen if Dynamite was 3 hours. These are the matches that we
Yeah.
would see. And
Listen, they're in a
so,
conundrum. I get it. I get it. They have to. They have to do it. They have to give these matches. But you know, right now it's a testing period, obviously, to see what works, see what doesn't.
well, and Rampage is the one that's staying on TNT, right?
Yeah.
So, that's a show that they're going to be able to build this loyal long-term Friday audience. The thing that I think the thing that's interesting to me is there is an argument that all of the shows that Dynamite did plus the pay-per-view where they were running these big markets and you had to have these high quality big matches,
Yeah.
that you may have overexposed someone like CM Punk a little bit to where, if you maybe he's there 1 week and he's not there the next week, and then maybe he's there, in 2 weeks, he still feels a little bit more special. They even promoted something on Friday. They're like, "Oh, hear from CM Punk about, this next thing." And it was just like a video package of him
Yeah.
doing a short promo. And I was like, that if I stayed for this show to hear from CM Punk, I would have been disappointed in that segment. So there is an argument that they are overexposing some of these guys who could be ratings draws, like you said, CM Punk, Daniel Bryan. I think they both were, or at least CM Punk was definitely a ratings draw for those first couple times. But now
Oh,
what does he
absolutely.
mean when he's just a part of the show now? So that's an
Well, we're gonna
interesting
find
thing.
out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That
That's the thing. We're gonna find out. And listen, I'm throwing this out there because I think it's an interesting discussion to have. And you have to be honest about what you're watching. I I I watch Rampage every week. To add another hour of wrestling, you got to be putting on a good level of TV. I mean, that's the bottom line. The interesting thing is, people expected that rating to go down after the Danielson match because you got the main event, but instead the rating went up. The numbers went up as the show went along. So it kind of the logic of it's very interesting to me. I personally, I'm fascinated by stuff like this. I'm fascinated with what the little tweaks that companies make that ends up working, becoming something, doesn't become something. Um, Listen, they're on a roll that I don't think any company in the history of professional wrestling in 2 years has ever been able to do. A lot of that is the talent that they have. A lot of that is disenfranchised fans finally finding something that reminds them of the wrestling that they like. Also, here's the reality for me. I had a awakening moment when I went to SummerSlam where I realized I'm viewing these things totally wrong. I can't view WWE as professional wrestling or what I call professional wrestling. It's a spectacle. Everything they do is big and extravagant, and the characters are big, the outfits are big, and AEW is a rock concert to me.
mm-hmm,
I'm going
mm-hmm.
to a rock and roll concert rather than going to Broadway. Rather than going to Cirque du Soleil, I'm going to a rock concert, and that vibe in in the AEW buildings, whatever show. I mean, I've been to 2 shows already, and I'm going to be at a third one in a couple of weeks. The vibe is really different compared to a WWE show. I just hope that Rampage doesn't take away that momentum a little bit.
I think it's a fair argument, and I think the people who look at Rampage and think, oh, is it maybe not? I think they'll say, look, the ratings for what they were doing in that previous time slot on a Friday night, it's the youngest show, or all of these different ways you can look at it as a success, but it is more content, and it is seeing these people who on Dynamite. One of the problems that I had with Dynamite was like a Sammy Guevara gets a nice little push, and then you wouldn't see him for 3 weeks, and I go, man, where's Sammy? What's going on here? But
that's why you
sometimes
need
the
this
flip.
second show.
Well, yeah, that's why you need the second show. But sometimes I think it works in the reverse, which is like, I think I've seen CM Punk on every single show since he came back. And look, he's a great character. He's a great, pro wrestler. I enjoy seeing him, but I do wonder if it takes away from the specialness sometimes, and then now he's just kind of like an AEW talent rather than like this giant superstar. the other thing that I was going to ask you about. Oh, so you're probably the best person to talk with this about, which is the WWE home base being New York. AEW ran Arthur Ashe, which you were at. WWE ran SmackDown at MSG. Now they're both running this new Long Island arena. What is
UBS
your
Arena.
what is your takeaway from the lack of ticket sales for Raw or for the WWE show?
Uh, I got to it speaks volumes, right? Obviously AEW is a hot ticket. I'm not saying that they're better. I'm not saying that they're beating WWE. I'm just saying it's a hotter ticket. The show it's the first run. Actually, this would be the second run in New York. And they're outselling WWE tremendously. It's a hotter product at the end of the day. That's really what it comes down to, and it's giving people something that they want to watch. Vince's argument always was, he doesn't care about football and rating. We never heard about the football ratings in the 90s the way that we hear about it now.
Except when they were beating them in the late 90s, then you would hear about it.
Then
because
you would hear about
there were
it,
times where they were beating the NFL. With Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football went through a low period at some point, and they were not putting the best matchups out there. And Raw and Nitro were both beating Monday Night Football in that in that demographic, but not happening anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean it's a whole different beast now. But you hear about like, oh, something was on, and that's why the demo shifted, or this was on. Like, there's a lot of excuses, but years ago, nobody made those excuses. At the end of the day, if you have a product people want to watch, they will find a way to come and watch it. I went to Chicago. I didn't have to go to Chicago. I went. I didn't get paid to go to Chicago. I went on my own dime because I wanted to experience the show.
We paid to go to Chicago.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize we paid. Nobody paid us to be in Chicago. We paid to go to Chicago because it was something we all wanted to be a part of. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Everybody is fighting for your dollar now. Competition, You're not competing with WWE only. AEW's competition is not WWE. It's everything. Every event, everything happening. Me deciding to go to dinner is competition for AEW, right? Or WWE. It's same, vice versa. It doesn't matter. You know how many times there have been WWE events at the Garden? I go through that building every day. I go through Penn Station. And I've looked up, I've seen the market, and I go, I'm going to go home. Because it hasn't been something I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah.
Now, it's a different story. People, they're trying. Both companies are attempting everything to gain you as a viewer and gain you as a in attendance fan. And I think AEW is doing a little bit of a better job than WWE is.
Yeah. The ratings still are not available, so unfortunately we will not have a number on this show.
I thought I had it.
Did you have it?
Yeah. 1.847.
1.847. And what did they do last week? They did 1.708. So yeah, that was that's the best number, at least for the overall average audience, going back September the 8th. So it looks like the draft was able to reverse a little bit of this. Good for them.
Yeah, hopefully they'll keep the momentum now.
What other levers can they pull though, man? What's the lever for next week when they go up against football?
I mean, I got to tell you though, they have been aggressive with Raw the last couple of weeks. Something changed.
I had this discussion. So we, I don't want to turn this into a plug thing, but my Patreon for Fight Game Media, we just started out a new WWE podcast called The Wrap. And the idea behind The Wrap is like, let's look at WWE's entire week. Let's look at all the things that are happening on Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, and let's put them in a sort of a priority list, and we'll talk about them like having a conversation. And one of the things that I was wondering about was the hot shotting that's going on. Because on one hand, Raw is a better show because of the hot shotting. But on the other hand, as we know historically, when it comes to hot shotting, there's an effect, and it's usually a negative effect because you can't keep up the hot shotting like continuously. Like you do have to have like this long term stuff that plays out. Like Big E winning the title in the Bobby Lashley match in the steel cage. They had this draft. I just wonder, at some point you run out of levers, and then what do you do? Again, it's made Raw a much better show. Like there's more things happening on Raw, but I do wonder if in a few weeks, in a few months, it's gonna, they're gonna have to pay for it in some way.
I don't know. I maybe in our chat room, somebody posted that Monday night game next week is Colts Ravens, so it's a pretty weak competition. So
Yeah.
I would say I personally don't call it hot shotting. I think they're kind of getting back to what TV was like for them. Where you gotta provide something that people need to tune in for. Like, what am I tuning into Raw next week for? Right? Like AEW, they're doing a decent job at making me want to tune in week over week outside of me covering it, right? Like I try to
Right.
look at it as the layman, as someone, a P2 viewer just channel surfing, and I'm like trying to figure it out. I what has Raw done over the last couple of weeks that I want to watch it? You know what? There's title defenses, there's been title change, there's stuff going on. I don't I got a very strange email just now. I'm so sorry.
Live streaming here.
Very strange. I got a very bizarre email. It has to do with wrestling. I got to finish reading it because I can't believe what I just read. Sorry, guys. It really derailed me when I saw the subject line.
We're live, pal.
Yeah, we're live, pal. I don't know. I like it better. It's a much better TV show.
It's a better show.
I
sure.
I don't necessarily call it shot-shotting. Maybe they just getting back in the rhythm of things where they're remembering how to write captivating television that you're going to tune in for each week. Listen, I know that's a stretch and that's a lot. But they have to be aggressive now. They're sitting back and having the dominance of 5 hours of professional wrestling a week that majority of people will watch that like wrestling. That's out the window. Now there's another option, and it's not that it's on their ass, but it kind of is.
Yep. Look, the whole reason why AEW being successful, well, that's not the whole reason. Obviously, AEW, you want competition. You want other people to find jobs, to be able to, if you only have one company and there's only one title and, the upward mobility is not really there, let's do this other company because they can also make stars and do their own thing. But the other part of this that was important was to reignite WWE in some way, right? Now they have to pay attention to this other company. Now we get to see if Vince McMahon still has a pulse. Those things are important for WWE's sake. And I feel like, thanks to AEW, certain things are things that WWE's now paying attention to that they may not have without AEW. So I think that's been a positive. And look, maybe Vince still has a couple things under his sleeve, right? That he's been waiting for to the right, whatever, who knows? But I do think it's been good overall for the business because now competition is just good. And AEW's done what the thing that they've exposed WWE a bit on is this idea that there's one way to do this, and there's like Triple H always calls it like the WWE style or whatever. AEW showed you that you can do it in this different way, and it works just as well, maybe even better in some ways. And so that's a little bit of an exposition of WWE's the way that they do things. Now, they may be super stubborn and continue to do things that way, but what we've been seeing out of Raw, I do think that's been a reaction both to Monday Night Football and to AEW. And so I hope that the creativity continues. I just would like them to lay some things out a little bit more so that we can actually sink our teeth into, some stories that happen over a month and a half or 2 months and not just week to week.
Yeah, same. I agree with you.
All right, man. We're good to go here. We missed Denise. We can't wait for Denise to be back.
We did miss Denise.
She got a little bit of rest time, though. I highly doubt that she was resting. I think she was probably continuously working because that's what she does. But yeah, so Andrew, it was a pleasure. Love talking to you about this stuff. Had a blast. And yeah, so for Andrew, I'm Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.